Justice delayed is justice denied. It's an old adage, we all know it. But what happens when there simply isn't a judge to actually hear your case? Well, that seems to be the reality down in the Western Cape at the moment. The High Court was forced to postpone over 10 matters. That was just on Monday. So let's try and get a sense of what is going on and what the knock-on effects are here. Judges Matter researcher, it's Mbekezeli Benjamin joining us to try and make sense of this. Mbekezeli, good morning. Appreciate your time. First of all, can you tell me what is going on at the High Court in the Western Cape? How bad is the situation?
Good morning, Gareth, and good morning to the viewers. Well, the situation seems pretty bad. From what Judge Robert Henny said on Monday, is that there are just now not judges available to deal with the cases. And some of the cases that were supposed to run this week all the way through to September involve gang-related crime, and that is a very complex crime. There are multiple witnesses. There are about 32 witnesses. There are about 10 accused, and all of them are high risk and high security accused. And so this is a very big problem. In the Western Cape, for example, there are about 30 judges at any one time. But of course, the population of the Western Cape is quite large. It's about 5.5 million. And over the last little while, the population has been growing steadier and steadier. The crime has been becoming more violent and more complex. So the bottom line is that we need more judges. And unfortunately, in the Western Cape and many other high courts across the country, there are just not enough judges available.
Would you go as far as to suggest how many more judges we need? If we're saying there aren't enough, and we know how much we have currently, is there a number in mind that would make sense to you that we should be aiming for to get more judges? I realize I'm asking to get more judges like they're a box of Smarties, of course. We can't just buy judges. They don't just come out, they don't fall out the sky. But how many more do we need?
Well, look, there is currently a committee that is run by the retired Deputy Chief Justice that is trying to find the exact number using a scientific method to look at what are the needs of the courts, what is the population size. But I think we can do a rough estimate to say we currently have about 250 judges across the country, and they are there to serve the whole population of South Africa of 62 million people. We've had those same 250 judges for at least the last 10 years. And as you know, over the last 10 years, our population has grown by the millions. And so we really need many more judges than we currently do. Let's take, for example, the Labour Court. If you and I were dismissed from our jobs today, we will only come before a judge in about 2025. And the reason is because there are only 13 judges in the Labour Court that are there to serve the whole country. And so you can see the need there is so great that it actually has a ripple effect on people who are unfairly dismissed and who are waiting for justice in their cases.
Help someone like me as a layman in Mbekezeli understand when it comes to getting more judges onto the benches, what's the process for someone who is, for example, a lawyer who then becomes is it then an advocate or then an attorney, or an attorney then an advocate? What's the steps for someone who's a practicing legal practitioner to make their way to becoming a judge? What's the process involved there? Isn't there a way to speed that up? I'm not saying just to push people through, obviously, but aren't there people in the wings?
So there are plenty of people in the wings. For our courts, usually they are drawn from practicing lawyers. That includes attorneys, advocates, magistrates, and some law academics. So for you to become a judge, you must have expertise in the law, you must have expertise in court procedure, you must understand the Constitution and the values of the Constitution, and you must also be a very hard worker. But the real problem here, Gareth, is that there are just not enough spaces. So for you to appoint a judge, obviously it costs money, but you also need office space in the courtrooms. You also need additional support in the form of a secretary, of a researcher, all of those support structures that are there to support the work of a judge. So it's not that we don't have people available. We have plenty of people available. It's just that there are no posts available. And what we as Judges Matter are actually advocating for is that as an interim measure, Treasury should allocate more money so that at least we can find a few acting judges who will show us up until this final study is done at the exact number of judges that we need for our courts.
Then two things on that. How many acting judges do you think could at least plug the hole for the moment? I know you're saying the number for full-time judges is still being debated at the moment. That number will come out later on. But how many acting judges do you think could just try and help the situation? And as far as Treasury is concerned, have there been discussions with Treasury already about this?
So let me take your second question first. There have been discussions with Treasury. As we understand it, the Minister of Justice has been asking Treasury for more money to appoint acting judges, and some of that money has come through. But of course, because of the economic situation in the country, the Treasury has also put a cap on the amount of money that has been given. So what has happened is a lot of the high courts have asked lawyers to give their pro bono time. So some of the hours that they are supposed to serve for community service to come on to the bench and act as judges. That seems to work, but of course it's not sustainable. But as to the exact number of acting judges that we need, it really depends on a number of factors. So for example, if you go to Joburg or Pretoria, on any one day, there are at least 11 additional acting judges that are sitting in the courts. So in a period of a term, which is about 6 weeks, they would use up about 11 to 15 additional acting judges. When I say additional, it means additional to the 40 judges that are stationed in Pretoria and the 40 that are stationed in Johannesburg. So you can see that the need really is about 55 judges for the Joburg High Court, but the current posts, in terms of the formalized post, they are only about 40. So you can see that there's a big gap, and that must be filled as quickly as possible.
Yeah, there's a major disparity there as well. As I start saying goodbye to you, Mbekezeli, obviously high court cases are being postponed. I was taking a look at some of the court rolls. Cases that were meant to start this last Monday now postponed to 2024. There was even a big one in the Western Cape postponed to 2025, of course. What then happens, and this might be a very detailed answer, so forgive me if I'm asking it so late in the conversation. What now happens to those people who are in custody at the moment, awaiting a judge to be available to hear their case? What does that mean down the road when it gets to sentencing? Because those accused are waiting in jail. It's not their fault necessarily. There's no judge. What does that mean when they finally get to court?
Yeah, let me try and answer it as quickly as possible, Gareth. But the main thing is that the people who are in jail, so people spend upwards of 5 years, 6 years, even 10 years waiting for their trial to start. And some of them, the unfairness is when you're found not guilty and you've already spent 5 years in prison. But the other issue is that even when the trial starts, a lot of the witnesses would have died. Some of the memories would have faded, so people can't remember the details. And so even if a crime was committed, but if there was no evidence, there's no testimony, people have forgotten the facts, then that person can't even be found guilty. So it's a real problem in criminal cases. I mentioned earlier about labor cases where people are dismissed and you wait a long time to get to court. And that really means you're unemployed for all of that period. For people who are owed money in small businesses, they also can't get their money back until they get through the court system. So it really is, it affects so many people at all different stages of life and society.
No, I think you've explained it beautifully, just what the problem is here, what the knock-on effects are. And Mbekezeli, really appreciate your time this morning. Judges Matters, Mbekezeli Benjamin making time for me this morning. So short.